There are episodes that I just so look forward to recording. And then there are episodes that just need to exist. They need to be recorded. Today is that second kind. So grab a seat, get comfortable, because we are going to be talking about some heavy stuff today. Hello, my beautiful entrepreneurs. My name is Tabitha, and welcome to A Hot Mess Builds an Empire. I help day one entrepreneurs take that first terrifying leap into business ownership without completely losing their minds in the process. This channel is for the people who are standing on the edge of something really scary, but also equally just as marvelous, wondering if they are absolutely unhinged for even considering the jump. Before we really dive into today's episode, I'm just going to put the biggest trigger warning out there. We're talking about mental health, suicide, and just carrying a lot of heavy things. So if you are not in the space to be watching this episode right now, I encourage you to turn it off and maybe revisit it later. However, if that is not a topic that you're able to handle at any point in time, then I'm sorry, this video probably is not for you. And for those of you who may be struggling with some things right now and you're looking for some help or looking to talk to a counselor, you can always contact 988 by text or calling, and that will lead you to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And there's counselors always standing by that are available to help you. You know, I think it's interesting that I'm here to talk about some deep things today, but I'm still going to plug Hot Mess Triage, my one-on-one coaching service. And the reason for that is I share a lot of like businessy things that go on from my experience or talking to day one entrepreneurs how to set up better systems, right? But today I'm going to be talking about like such heavy, heavy stuff and things that I carry with me constantly, and still also build a business while carrying these things that I think it's really important for you to know. I have a one-on-one coaching service, and this is from someone who just gets it. I have bipolar, I have manic depression, I have anxiety, I have ADHD. I am, as my dear friend Raven would say, neurospicy. My brain just doesn't work the same way as a lot of other people's brains. And I have like emotional baggage and trauma that I carry with me constantly, but I still do my best to show up even when the days aren't great. So I'm still going to plug it because there is no correct way to being an entrepreneur. There's no wrong way to being an entrepreneur, but there are easier ways to being an entrepreneur. And that's where I come in. And I get it. I get a lot of stuff. I've had my business for 10 years. So I get like the working with brands and working by yourself and hiring people and all that stuff. But I also get real life, right? So if you're interested in booking a one-on-one call, you can find the link in this YouTube description that will take you to my Stand store, and I am available on Sundays and Tuesdays. There is this weird thing that I do, and I'm not sure if anybody else does it, and I've done it for years. I think I've done it since I was like 18, is on around New Year's Eve and around my birthday, which is in July, I do like a 6-month review of myself. How have I evolved? What books have I read? What am I holding on to that I should let go of? Am I in a good place with my friendships? And these review questions have definitely evolved over time. Like I didn't just like starting at 18 going like, am I in toxic friendships? No, it never really started that way. But it has evolved to that now. And around New Year's, I don't really set resolutions anymore, but I look at the year ahead and I'm just kind of like, what are my goals for my business? What are my goals for my evolution of self? And how's my self-awareness, that kind of thing. And then around my birthday, I'm like, what have I done so far this year? What am I planning to do for the rest of the year? And I just kind of like, check in on my goals. And it's just how the timing works out for everything. But in 2020, 6 years ago now, which is so crazy for a lot of reasons, but in 2020, my father died, and my father died by suicide. So that was just something that was, that man struggled mentally and emotionally his whole life. So for his last few years of life, he was he was in it, right? And so while it's not a shock, it's a shock, right? Um, and the anniversary of his death is coming up soon, which is, just a little bit before my birthday. And I realized around that time of year, I start to do sort of like a mental health check-in with myself. Because I mean, I will never forget the day that my sister called me to tell me he had passed away. And, I was in Virginia Beach with my only contract that I was able to keep for the year of 2020. I was doing photography for Road Trippers and Campgrounds of America. And yeah, literally had the camera in my hand and she called. Um, and that was like a 9-hour drive back home. And I broke down. I was just, I I knew I could no longer take whatever it is that life had for me. I knew I couldn't do it. And this was coming from somebody who has bipolar manic depression and was not medicated at the time. No therapy, no nothing. 2020 was awful for literally the world. Um, and I had lost um, over the course of the year of 2019 into 2020. Um, Not COVID related, but I had lost my two grandmothers, my grandfather, a cousin who was my age, and a friend. And there was just so much death in my life that when my father passed, who I feel like I had a very good relationship with, like someone you're close to, um, because it's funny. I always consider my dad as like, I always considered him more of a friend than my dad, just because he was, so young and and I love him to death, but he was not the best parent. Like, just let me get away with so much. But he was a very good friend, right? And to just lose that after all of the loss I had already experienced, I was in the car and I was like, I can't do it anymore. I can't possibly do anything else in my life. I can't do it. I've hit a weird kind of rock bottom, and my dear friend stayed on the phone with me the whole 9-hour drive home to make sure I was okay, because she knows we've known each other since kindergarten. So she knows how I am, and she would not get off the call when I peed. She would not get off the call when I went through drive-thrus to get food, and just shove sustenance in my face so I could continue driving. She wouldn't get off the phone when I was pumping gas, which is so appreciated. And, to have that breakdown, I, every year now I do this, like, where are you mentally? Where are you emotionally? How are you doing? Because if there's anything that I learned from my dad's death, it's that there are a lot of things that I would love to follow in the footsteps of my father, but that is not one of those things. Um, and that is a hard, hard thing to address with yourself when you struggle mentally and emotionally with certain things. Um, so yeah, that was just something that I check in on now annually. I have a therapist, I'm medicated, I'm in a really good place, um, which is probably like the healthiest thing to say about myself, other than like my physical health is really good as well because of like all my weight loss and everything. But to have that self-awareness going like I'm in a really good place, I think um that's something that my dad would be really proud of, that I addressed. Um that I took away from his death, and as I was like, I couldn't do this to my family, or my friends or anybody. So yeah, that is a weird lesson to take away from somebody passing away, but it's it's a lesson that I took away from the situation. So I do, because I am talking about the heaviness that is carried, I think it's very important for me to talk about my dad in general. I think it's very healthy to talk about that man because he was by far one of the most hilarious people you would have ever have met. Everybody always told him he should go into stand up. He would do voices so well. And he just had such a crazy sense of, like, that man was nuts. In like sometimes in the best possible way, sometimes in a way where you were just like, Dad, you are literally on the fine line between genius and insanity kind of thing. Because the thing is that man was brilliant. If there are just a handful of things you can say about my dad, it was that he was funny and he was smart. Oh my God, was he smart. And let me give you an example. During COVID, I was still trying to blog, but I was trying to change it up because nobody was traveling. Nobody was reading my travel blog. My website had like absolutely tanked. So I was trying different avenues of like interest. So one of the things I had written about was 9 ways to read for free. People were broke, people were bored, people were at home. And I also wanted it to be a blog post that it was legitimate ways to read for free from libraries that were like authors approved or, certain websites, or like using Kindle Unlimited or your Prime benefits through Amazon to get free downloads and stuff like that. And it was still like in favor of authors everywhere. And it was one of the few times my dad was sober. And he just read everything from Albert Einstein. And one day he posted on Facebook how he took his nuclear physics equations and he discussed the theory of powering a city with the tip of a lead pencil using these equations. Now, I would not have been able to understand these nuclear physics books. I would not have been able to understand the math. I would not have been able to understand the theories. But man, my dad had this amazing way of taking these ridiculously complex things, understanding them as if it was just somebody saying 1 + 1 = 2. My dad would be like, oh, let me explain this to you. And he had this amazing way of breaking it down. And he just had this Facebook post that shared that breakdown. And I read it and I was just like, wow, I must understand nuclear physics now because like this man is so smart. He broke it down for me to understand, and it's just that kind of stuff that I think about. I mean, he got into MIT, which unfortunately he didn't go to because, I mean, long stories about my dad, but he was like AWOL from the Navy. I was a thing. And I think he felt the duty of showing up for his newborn, than chasing education. And that's also a weird thing that I carry. Like there are a lot of weird things that I carry because I was a surprise baby, for young parents. So there are a lot of things that I carry with me that I'm just kind of like, had I not won my first race, right? Things would be different for my family, I think, in a good way. And I don't mean that negatively about my existence. I think there are just things that my family would have been more prepared for, right? Like, so that's also some weird, heavy stuff that I carry. But yeah, my dad was just like, loved referential humor. Was always using Family Guy as like his main point of like explaining complicated things. Do you remember that Family Guy episode when Peter does this and Lois does this? That is the complete example of this mathematician's theory. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He had an amazing music collection, and he had like eclectic taste. And I feel like the eclectic taste that I have is because of him listening to the 70s, 80s, the 90s. I don't think he got into too much of the 2000s and later music, but from like the 60s to the 2000s, like beginning of 2000s, like that man had like everything, and illegally downloaded But, he just had everything. And there was this one day I was visiting him, and I was on my computer, he was on his computer, because that's how you bonded with my dad. You had to be on a computer with him. That man was always sitting in front of his computer. And he started playing the Eagles, but it was like an obscure Eagles song, not like Hotel California or Lying Eyes or something. I forget the name of the song, but it was the Eagles. And I was like, oh, I love this song. I love the Eagles. And he just looks over and he goes, Tabby, oh my God, I didn't know you loved the Eagles. And there was like this weird bonding moment where my dad realized like I had good taste in music. And he's like, I didn't know. I'm like, Dad, you play this all the time when I was growing up. Like, it's like embedded in me. So it's just like fun little moments like that you think of. But then there's like, oh my God, I would text that man the craziest things. He was so good about getting heightened emotionally with you. So if I needed somebody to be mad with me, like if something crazy happened at work or in the family and there was drama, and you'd be mad at someone, like I'd text him, I'd be like, do you have a minute? I'm really mad. And he'd call and be like, what are you mad about? I'm mad about it too. Let's be mad about it together. And he would get so heightened with you. And the other thing too is like, if you'd call me and be like, Dad, the craziest thing happened. I saw this pelican on the way to work and it was in the woods, and he'd be like, what the fuck? And you're like, yes, I know. Like he would meet your level. He'd meet your level. And although I have people in my life who in certain situations can meet my level, there's just something that my dad did that nobody else can do. And, that's rough to never have that again. And even 6 years later, I was at work the other day and I just saw the funniest thing. And for a brief moment, I forgot that man passed away, and I pulled him up in my text messages and I was like, oh, it's been a while since I've talked to him. I should send him this. That was weird. Very weird. I reached out to my siblings and I was just like, do you guys have these moments where it's like it's 6 years later and you're still trying to text your dead father? And they were like, yeah, all the time, all the time. So I felt very grateful in that moment that I wasn't alone, but man, that really packs a punch. It really packs a punch. To just have that realization. I think it's different when your grandparents pass away. I think that's more naturally organic because they are older than you, right? By like decades, they've lived their lives. But my dad was only 52. And that is quite young. But he also, my mom had told me at one point in time, said that he knew he would never die an old man. He just knew in his soul he would never grow old, which is just so sad, to think about that's how that man viewed himself in his life. And, even his last words where you can, cause he made YouTube videos the night of his passing away. And he had videos on his phone and stuff when we got his items, and some of them were just him talking about his feelings and this feeling of isolation and feeling lost. And but he just basically said, like, you could get me cremated and throw my ashes in the trash, so it's just easier for everybody. Like, he was just obviously not in a very good space. And it's just so sad to think that there is nothing that I could have done to change that man's mind about how much he was loved. So, but I think too, it's really important to acknowledge that grief is not linear. You don't just get over things. And that happens a lot. Some days are just better than others. Some days I don't notice that he's gone. I don't remember that he's gone. And then there's days where I'm like, I can't call him anymore. And those are tough days to get through. Um, it's funny. I told myself I wasn't going to cry, and I was like, keep it together. Um, but I know that my business coach, she cries in all of her, like, not all of her videos, but she's like a big crier in some of her videos. And she even posted the one day. She was like, I am sure people are tired of me crying in my videos, but I feel like I'm part of a club now of vulnerability on the YouTube where I'm crying in a video. Um, but yeah, grief is not linear, and that's okay. It's allowed to not be linear. Like but I think there's something really good about grief in the sense that if you take all the bad things that happen to you or things that you have lost or whatever, which I'm going to get into this more in a minute, and you just kind of bury it and ignore it, I feel like that's worse because at least grieving, there's, even if not 100% closure, there is some type of closure. There is some type of, no, this is the end of this. And you can still grieve afterwards. It's not like you can only grieve once and then it's like, well, I grieved this thing, so it's over. Like grieving is a lifelong experience. It's a lifelong carry on, as I call it. And, I just think it's one of those things where you carry a lot of grief with you, that sometimes bubbles up and sometimes you're able to manage it for months. And, it hits us all differently. There's times where it's just like that one moment, like I found that funny thing and I was going to text the man that had been dead for 6 years. And I was like, okay, what do I do? I think I went and I got some water and I walked outside for a minute because I was just like, I just needed air. I just needed air. But I also want to talk about grief in another sense because, kind of moving on away from talking about my dad specifically, there are so many versions of grief that we just don't acknowledge exist. Like, I think there's already a weird thing about grief being something that we talk about, and it's like a very vulnerable state. And, and like, I think there's like this weird stigma and taboo that you have to sort of grieve quietly and privately. And when people talk about their grief, like, I think it makes other people feel awkward. And I think it comes from like a sense of like, how do I console this person? Oh, this person's crying. Like, people get uncomfortable. But I think we should talk about grief more, and not just with the loss of a parent or the loss of a loved one, right? But like grieving the loss of friendships, right? Over the years, like you kind of grow apart or you stop talking to someone because of XYZ thing, or grieving past selves. I have grieved over past selves multiple times in my life where I have evolved and then I'm just kind of like, but she was pretty cool. And I give that respect to the evolution of myself. I do grieve over past selves. I grieve over, how I used to be without medication. Oh, I just like really hit my desk. I grieve about how I was without medication because I think there are huge chunks of my life that would have been so much better if I was seeing a therapist and medicated and had the tools that I needed to survive certain situations or certain conversations or navigate certain challenges in life. And, I went unmedicated for a very long time because I think we don't talk enough about having heavy depression brings on memory loss. And there are a lot of things that I do not remember about high school. There are a lot of things that I feel like are just these jumps in time in my life because of just how depressed I would get. Or, in high school, I was very heavily medicated the last 2 years of high school. And I just don't think I remember a lot because I just wasn't there. So when I went out on my own and I turned 18, I was like, no, I'm not going to be medicated like that. Like, I don't want to be a zombie through my life. And so I just thought medication was the enemy. But I realized, over the course of way too many years, like, you just have to be an advocate for yourself and your health, and with like any doctor. And, when I started seeing the doctor that I still see today, I was like, I need to be in control, but I don't want to be completely lost. And he was like, I got you. So we found like a really good balance, and I see a therapist, and I can still remember things, and I still have good emotional control. And I feel very blessed that I found the doctor that I have. He's the only male doctor that I have, actually, because I truly believe my health has changed for the better by switching to all female doctors. But this was one doctor in particular that actually listened to me. He got it. And I can't possibly stray away from a doctor that's listening to me, about something that's very important. That that doesn't just impact my health, but it impacts like my relationships, my family, my friends, everything like that. And so that's the only male doctor that I have, fun fact. But yeah, grief looks like there's no size requirement for grief, right? Like, you don't have to be like, here's this insane event that happened. Like, I think you can grieve things in your business, like the loss of an idea. Like, you chase things, and it just didn't work out, and you can grieve that loss of time. And I think there's a different type of reflection that comes with that, because you don't regret it. You're just very upset that it didn't work out. And you can grieve over that, and that's okay. And I just don't think we talk about like all the different types of grief that exist. And and I think we should, especially when it comes to running being the solo person for your business. Like, I think it's really important to dive into the heavy days, the heavy carry-on days, because you need to be able to be self-aware about your emotions and your mental bandwidth, and know what it is that you can handle, so you don't burn out, or so that you don't give up. And so to know that you can grieve over all of these different things in your life, like, I think it's just very helpful to know that that's okay. Your feelings are valid. And I think one of the, what did I write here that I think is really important to note is that, in the small, unglamorous, barely functional moments of forward motion, that is where character is built. I wrote that out. Because even though there's very heavy grief, right, there's also this weird strength that comes out. You just like, you see what you're made of when things happen. And yeah, it's just, it's interesting how it inspires movement, and keep looking forward. And I feel that way about my dad passing away. Is, it inspired me to get myself into a better place, because I don't think I would be where I am today mentally and emotionally, if I didn't get myself into a better place. Like, I'm not sitting here saying like I wouldn't be here, but I'm just saying, like, I think I'd be in a really, really dark place, because I really struggled for very many years, with that neurospiciness that hits a lot of people at certain times. So, but I do want to talk about sort of the parallels between grief and business, because they're both long games, and I want to bring it back to business a little bit. They're both long games, because you're going to have these moments where it requires you to move forward, and you don't know when it's going to get easier. You're going to have moments. What did I say? Sorry, I made myself very sad, so I'm relying on notes. You're going to have moments where you feel like you're finally through it, and then something catches you off guard, and you're right back in the thick of it. Grief has that way of doing that to you. But they both require you to develop a relationship with discomfort. And I think there's something really beautiful about being comfortable in being uncomfortable, because there's a lot of growth that comes from discomfort. There's a lot of growth that comes from that uncomfortability of putting yourself out there with your business, or putting yourself out there with your grief, and letting your emotions, have their moment. And, I always feel that everybody's emotions are completely valid. It's what you do with them afterwards that I think is where it shows character and shows what you're made of, right? And that execution of like, whether it's one day, whether it's 5 years, there's no timeline on waking up from grief one day and just being like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do with what I've learned from this experience. And I think it's important to know you don't just have like a dramatic triumphant return. Things gradually happen. Things gradually fall back into place. Things kind of gradually align. Things gradually change. Yeah, it's not like this cinematic montage. I always think of the Sex and the City episode after Charlotte has her miscarriage, and she just like decides she's gonna be Elizabeth Taylor and get through it. And she just like watches the Elizabeth Taylor documentary and then like goes out of her Park Avenue apartment, and she's just like taking on the world. Like I just don't think it's night and day like that. And I hope you know that too. It's okay that it's not night and day like that, because that's not how it usually works, right? Is you don't just watch a documentary on Elizabeth Taylor and you can suddenly tackle the world. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm just saying usually it's very gradual. It's not like the cinematic montage of strength over the course of 5 minutes, 10 outfit changes, and then you're suddenly at Brady's birthday party celebrating that he's 1 year old. Which that's a Sex and the City reference. Yes, I've seen all of it. But what do I want you to take from this episode, right? Because it's kind of all over the place emotionally. It's very dark. But whatever you are grieving, it's totally valid. Whether you are grieving, like for the longest time, I was grieving not being an entrepreneur for 2 years because I felt like I was grieving the loss of a dream. Like for the longest time, I just knew that I wasn't meant to be in your traditional 9 to 5. And I knew this, like, even though I didn't like have that recognition of what it is that I felt as a kid and like in high school and in college and stuff, like there is this understanding that I always knew I was going to do something different with my life, and I was going to be my own boss, and I was going to travel, and I was going to live like this very non-traditional path. And even though I do, yes, have a traditional full-time job, that's the point, is not to have that for forever. But I grieve those 2 years that I wasn't doing anything, because I think my business would be so much further along if I just had faith in myself. If I was just confident in myself, if I just was like, no, you know what you're doing, it's okay, keep going. And I just kept taking bad advice after bad advice and niche down and niche down and niche down. And I realized like niching down is what killed my creativity. Trying to show up on every single platform is what killed my bandwidth, right? And I grieve that time, because it deserves to be grieved. It was a very sad time for me. I was in a very dark place. It was after my dad passed away, and it was after my grandmother's passed away, my grandfather, and my cousin, and my friend. And, and I was just like, I'm not doing well with my business. I'm just not going to do this. And I went back to warehousing and e-commerce and logistics. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm meant for. And it's so sad that that's what I thought that I was meant for. Because I'm meant for so much more. I'm meant for so much more. And I really do grieve that time lost. But yeah, bringing it back to the end here, I think it's okay to be in heavy seasons, right? Where like things are heavy this season. Things are, the next month is going to be rough for me. Because it just usually is around this time of year. It just usually is. I think about them a lot more. I think about my grandmothers. It's Mother's Day. I think about them. Then there's Father's Day coming up, and who am I celebrating it with? So it's just like, it's a tough time of year for me, but it it also, like, there are really great memories that I have throughout my life of the time that I spent with my grandmothers, the time that I spent with my dad, and I can hold on to those, right? Like, that's life. As Carson the butler from Downton Abbey would say, life in the end of it all is the acquisition of memories. So the fact that I do have those memories is something beautiful that I will cherish. And that's kind of what helps me get through heavy days, is I'm just kind of like, yeah, but remember this, like, that was funny, and remember this, that was funny. And I try to, like, bring myself out of it. Like, like, you you lean on the good in the times of bad, right? And I just think the overall message I want you to get from this is we all are carrying something with us. Um, so if you are too, like, welcome to the club. Um, I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. I mean that there are a lot of people out there that you just don't know what it is that they're going through, right? And you don't know what it is that they're carrying day in and day out, but they show up for their business because they believe in their message, they believe in their community, they believe in themselves, but they still let grieving happen. And I was really inspired to dive into this topic from, you know, Andy, One Daring Adventure, because she wrote a book about a very significant loss that she had in her life, and you should go read it. Where she discusses the loss of her dear friend to cancer, and she discusses grief quite a lot on her channel, and I love that vulnerability. And with my dad's anniversary of him passing coming up, I was just like, this would be a really good topic to talk about. Like, we all experience loss in one way or another, whether it's close to us or kind of distant, like it's there. We all experience weird things that we grieve with our business. We all experience, the end of friendships, the end of dreams, the end of an idea, the intangible and the tangible. You're allowed to grieve over whatever it is that you need to grieve over, right? And I really wanted to create this episode. Like I said, there are some things that I really look forward to talking about, but there are some things that just kind of need to be a conversation. And I think today grief was the thing that needed to be a conversation. But again, I'm going to plug Hot Mess Triage, my one-on-one coaching service, that you can find. The link in this YouTube description will take you to my Stan store. I'm available on Sundays and Tuesdays. And we just go over the amazingness of your business. And I help you put processes in place with a 30 or 60-day plan. But I'm plugging this because I just want you to see that, like, yes, I'm running a business, and yes, I have products and services that I offer, but I'm also like a true human being going through the motions as well some days, or showing up for myself on hard days. And I truly get it. I really do. And that's why I'm very happy that Hot Mess Triage was requested of me, because I feel like it's challenged me in a new way as a business owner to show up differently for me and my business, and to show up differently for you. So thank you for being here today. This one was not easy to make. And if you made it this far, bless you, because this was like a really heavy episode where I just kind of rambled about the things that it is that I carry. And again, if you are struggling in your life, 988 is a service that you can call in the United States, or text in the United States, where there are counselors standing by to help you. It's okay to need help. And I learned that a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago, but a few years ago, I learned that it's okay to need help, and to see therapists, and to be medicated, and to not be okay. You know, we've all been there at some point in time, these low valleys in our lives, right? Like, everybody has gone through it. So just please don't feel that you are alone. Especially as like a solo entrepreneur, right? Like, when you own your own business, like, it's so isolating. already. And then when you start going through a grieving process, like it can feel even more isolating. So, please don't feel that way. There are a lot of people going through a lot of things that aren't always shared. Now, some people share it like crazy and good for them. And then there's people like me who it's probably going to be like the one video I do about grief, and I'm not going to touch it for a little while because this was a rough one for me to make. But thank you so much for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe if you are not a subscriber. And I hope you have an amazing day. I hope it's more uplifting after this, watching this video. And I will see you next time.